Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I am joined by the executive chairman of McCourt Global and the founder of Project Liberty, among many other accolades, Frank McCourt. Welcome, Frank.
Hi, Nikki. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about building a safer web. We're going to start with a TikTok conversation because that's what's going on right now. And I'm going to give a little backstory for listeners. So in April of this year, President Biden signed a law that requires ByteDance, the Chinese owner of TikTok, to either sell to an American company or we will remove the app from our app stores here in the US. And a couple weeks later, it was announced that you, Frank, are putting together a people's bid for TikTok should ByteDance decide to sell. So I'd like to start off with why TikTok? Why are you interested in buying TikTok?
Yeah, well, I'm interested in buying it, Nikki, so that we can move the 170 million individuals that rely on the platform over to a new and improved internet. You know, an alternative version where individuals control their identity, control their data, and permission its use. So, you know, rather than the current internet we have now, where we're surveilled, our data is scraped, we're profiled, and all of this data is aggregated by, essentially 5 companies in the U.S. And certainly exactly the point that's being made with TikTok, isn't it? Right, that our data we're being surveilled, our data is being scraped, and in the case of TikTok, it's going to China. But our own platforms, as I just mentioned, are doing the exact same thing. So Project Liberty is really focused on reimagining how the internet works so that we can reclaim our data, which is really our personhood in this day and age. It's everything about us. And so we can reclaim it from the machinery of big tech. And that's why I wrote Our Biggest Fight, was to shed light on the work of Project Liberty. And I just think the TikTok opportunity, you mentioned that this is now up for grabs, right? It's either going to be shut down or sold. And I'd rather see it continue so that the user base can continue to enjoy it and benefit from it. But I want to see it on a much healthier design and a much healthier set of principles rather than disrespecting people and stealing their data. Let's have TikTok on a platform where individuals are respected. As I say, they can reclaim their personhood and they own and control their identity and their data.
Okay. And that kind of describes why you're labeling it a people's bid, right? Because we are reclaiming our personhood and our data through this moving on to the safer platform, right?
Yes, it's for that reason, but also because I want the user base to own a piece of it, and then have a broad stakeholding, because it's really not, Nikki, that I want to own TikTok, and I certainly don't want to be the CEO of a social media platform. It's I want to use this as an opportunity to not just shed light on the problem, which is what Congress is focused on, but turn it into a solution to catalyze an alternative internet. And so I'd like to see lots of people get involved in this bid, including the 170 million that use the platform, so that we can make this new alternative internet happen, right? One that is more respectful of people, and one that will, give us far more agency, or will give us the agency that's been stripped of us, right? And really allow us to have the critical mass, the scale, to really stand up this alternative, let people see it, that it's possible, that it's happening, and then they can choose themselves whether they want to be on the existing internet, which we're all currently handcuffed to because there is no alternative, or whether they'd rather choose an internet that gives them all of the good things that the internet provides, but minimizes the bad things. And so, they imagine this internet where we permission the use of our data and the apps are clicking on our terms and conditions of use, rather than the current internet where we click mindlessly on these cookies and give up everything about us.
Yeah. And let's talk about what that new internet looks like and move off of TikTok because obviously you're saying this is bigger than TikTok. The internet is broken. Like you said, a few corporate behemoths own our data, our digital identities. And in your book, Our Biggest Fight, you state very clearly that these companies own us. So why should we be concerned about the current state of our data? Because I think most people are not concerned about it.
Yeah, I think this all snuck up on us, right? So
Yeah.
that when the internet, came upon us, it was, we trusted that it was going to be a good thing and that it was going to be used in the right way and it was going to
Hmm.
empower us and connect us and allow us to share information and knowledge and all get smarter and be a good thing for civilization. That was, after all, the intention of the creators of the internet and the World Wide Web.
Hmm.
What happened, however, is that the internet was co opted by a few large players, and now it's been colonized. And
Hmm.
it's no longer our internet. It really belongs to, essentially five big companies that all are in the business of scraping our data, aggregating it, and applying algorithms to it. And those are the same five companies that are now in the tech arms race to be the dominant players in generative AI. So
Hmm.
I think what's ironic is that, and in a good way, is that the US government's focus on TikTok and its model of surveilling American citizens and
Hmm.
all of our personal information being shipped off to China, I think it is actually opening people's eyes to the much larger issue that our own platforms are doing exactly the same thing. And so, why would we? I get the difference between the information going to China versus Silicon Valley, but do we really want our personal information going anywhere and being in the giving these centralized platforms control of us? Because
Hmm.
that's exactly what they have. They know everything about us, and it's not just where we shop or where we are physically located. It's about how we think and how we emote, and therefore how we're going to react to certain things. So they've made assessments of our personality, and they can very very effectively trigger all of us and control us. And I think that's just wrong. I think it's morally incorrect. And I think
Hmm.
we all feel, that we, of course, own ourselves. We should own our data and
Hmm.
control it, just like we own our biological makeup and our our physical being. In this day and age, where the internet is ubiquitous and we're dependent on it, it's not something we can really choose not to use.
Right.
We are our data, right? And I'm talking about our personal data. So
Hmm.
we should own it. We should control it. We should permission it. And if somebody is not doing what they say, we should rescind that permission. So again, return agency, autonomy, control to individuals, because quite frankly, in this digital age, we've lost it now, and we're the tech is progressing rapidly, but our society is regressing at
Hmm.
the also very very rapidly, and we're becoming subjects in this digital age and losing the rights that we have as citizens.
Hmm. And so they're taking our data from us, they're using it against us, and then they're not even really keeping it safe. So there's been a lot of privacy breaches, even through Google exposing our children's voice data, home addresses, all kinds of things. So I want to make it very clear that they're not keeping our data safe and they're using it against us. But listeners here are worried about our children. So I just want to circle back to our kids and how are these companies using our kids' data in a way that harms them? We know that there's a lot of scary stats right now. Suicide rates have skyrocketed. 1 in 4 high school students are seriously considering suicide. So the system is broken and the children are paying the price. So can you explain how these companies use our children's data in a way that harms them?
Yeah, so it's I tell the story in the book, Nikki, about imagine I'm the head of the postal service, and I
Hmm.
offer to deliver your mail for free. No more stamps. So you might
Hmm.
say to me, okay, what's the deal? And I say, well, I'm going to put a camera and a listening device in every room of your house, in your car, in your workplace. In other words, I'm going to follow you around 24/7 and surveil you and scrape all your information. And you'd say, well, that's creepy,
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, well, it's free. And then I would add, I'm going to open your mail and I'm going to read everything that's in it. So now I own your relationships, I own your thoughts, I own your feelings. I own everything about you. So you'd say, okay, no, it's not only creepy, it's not fair. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would say, oh, and by the way, I'm going to read your 13-year-old daughter's. Let's assume you have a daughter, 13 years old. I'm going to read her diary. I'm going to see that she's concerned about something like every 13-year-old is.
Mm-hmm.
We were all 13 once and we're all insecure about something. Well, let's say
Yeah.
it's her weight. So I'm going to send her information to make her feel worse about her
Mm-hmm.
weight. I'm going to send her things to get her to buy things. So I'm going to profit on making her
Mm-hmm.
feel worse about her weight. And then I'm also going to send her, videos and information about how to harm herself, cut herself and physically harm her. And this is what's proliferated now. And by the way, I think you'd rather have stamps than my version
Mm-hmm.
of free mail.
Yeah,
So
of course.
it's getting to your point of kids. Kids are innocent people, right? And they are they've grown up with this technology, and
Mm-hmm.
they're prolific users of it. What they don't really realize is that they're being preyed upon,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes until it's too late and something really bad has happened. Remember, there was a day and age you could make a mistake, and
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't a mistake for life. It was a mistake. You wrote something down that you wish you hadn't, but the
Mm-hmm.
piece of paper was thrown away and you were forgiven and you learned from your mistake. Now
Mm-hmm.
there's no throwing it away. Everything is forever, right? So someone
Yeah.
can take something that, a young person posts or tweets or whatever, and they do it kind of they're kids, and
Mm-hmm.
and then they realize maybe they shouldn't have said that, and then suddenly it's weaponized and used
Yeah.
against them,
Yeah.
and they're bullied and shamed, right? And then there's also just people, pre-internet were also just, bullied
Mm-hmm.
and taken advantage of. It's been happening, pre. The internet didn't start bullying. What it did
Mm-hmm.
is it created a tool to make
Yeah.
it to weaponize it and scale it and have
Constant.
the
Yeah.
mob, jump
Yeah.
on board and do it in a way that's anonymous. And so the poor person on the receiving end
Mm-hmm.
is really helpless against this barrage. And again, when you're a young person, you don't have the tools necessary to deal with all this. I mean, none of us really do. I don't, it's not
Mm-hmm.
just kids that are being bullied and harmed by this. Adults are too, but kids are vulnerable and they're not being protected, and they're innocent users of this technology, and then something happens that is very, very harmful. And what the moms that we were together with last week in
Right.
DC, what they
Mm-hmm.
bring forward is the personal stories where they've tragically lost children because of
Mm-hmm.
social media, whether it's bullying or access to poisoned drugs, fentanyl laced drugs,
Yep.
or and so on and so forth. These stories now are, I mean, we hear a story like this every day. It's an epidemic. It's horrible, actually.
Mm-hmm. And it's too often life or death. And parents share with me, you're supposed to learn from your mistakes, not die from them. And it's too risky nowadays. And parents who I speak with who have lost a child say, you can't think, not my child, because that's what I thought. And it can happen to anybody. And it's something that we need to tend to now before we lose more children. And you said in your book, and I want to quote this: so Zuckerberg, Musk, and their ilk are feudal overlords fighting over the territory they've seized from innocent people. We are not even afterthoughts in the battles. Why do you think these people don't care about our kids? They have kids. Why don't they care about ours?
Well, interesting. They don't let their kids on social media, do they?
Right.
Right, and they know best.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a great question. I wish I had an answer for it. I can only
Yeah.
say that once this becomes sort of all about the money and the power,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people just lose sight
Mm-hmm.
of what's our purpose here
Mm-hmm.
when we have this each a short period of time to live, what are we here for? And
Right.
what is this technology supposed to optimize for? I think sometimes people get blinded
Mm-hmm.
when they're so deep into it and focused on the being the most powerful platform or having the most users or making the most money,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes sort of the unhealthy north star,
Mm-hmm.
and they lose sight of the impacts. We've seen this in other industries before. We've seen it with big pharma and OxyContin, and we've seen it with tobacco. Cigarettes were sold to people, kids included, even
Yep.
after the CEOs knew that this cigarettes were addictive and harmful. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like this is new. What's new is that this is at a scale that's unprecedented, right?
Mm-hmm.
These technologies are, as I said earlier, we're highly dependent on them, so we don't have the ability to just not be on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is connected to the internet now. Our cars, our refrigerators, our dishwashers, as well as
Mm-hmm.
search, shopping, social, et cetera, et cetera. So the scale of what's going on and the amount of individual data that's being collected by these large platforms on each of us, and then how we're being intricately and intimately profiled and
Mm-hmm.
manipulated, it's really quite scary, and
Yeah.
it should be scary to everyone, and we shouldn't have to see young kids take their lives to wake up to this, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how many more stories do we need to hear from
Mm-hmm.
the Joanne Bogarts of the world to
Yeah.
wake up to this? There is a cry for help here, and what I try to point out in the book is that a lot of the problems we're dealing with in society right now, particularly the harms to children, are as a result of this technology.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Haidt, a Project Liberty fellow, wrote a book recently about this called The Anxious Generation, and he
Yep.
sheds great light on this and brings the research forward to and the evidence forward to prove the point. But
Mm-hmm.
again, those of us with kids, and I have 7 of them, we don't need lots of research or to be able to see how addictive this social media technology is and how it changes
Mm-hmm.
our kids if we're not careful. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure most parents see this with their own eyes.
Mm-hmm. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So you make the point in the book. Famous activist Thomas Paine achieved success in changing minds with his critique of the British monarchy. And he used sharp language to call out lies and ruthlessly expose inherent flaws in that system. And you stated that from then on, his readers could no longer unsee it. And I hear that phrase and use that phrase a ton during my conversations with parents. So that once they know the harms and the way the system is built to prey on their children, you can't unsee it and you can't unknow it. But herein lies the issue for parents. Like, we know it's bad, we know it's wrong, we know our children are in danger, but we don't know what to do. We feel stuck in the system. And a theme throughout your book, and this is the best part, is it doesn't have to be this way. You use that several times. And you and your team have a solution, a way to give us back our data, our personhood, control over our decisions, and the ability to protect our children. So are you still calling it the new net as a working title? Should we reference it as that?
Well, we can, for the sake of this conversation. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd love your listeners to come forward with what they think we should call this, because I think part of the fun here will be inventing all this together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like we talk about the people's bid for TikTok, let's invent the name. Let's invent how it works. Let's bring people in this time around that weren't at the table last time around when we left this
Mm-hmm.
just to a few technologists to design this technology in a way that it turned out to be exploitative and predatory. Let's
Mm-hmm.
design it this time around so that it's actually empowering, and it's something that we all can be super, super proud of. But for now, let's call it the new net. Yeah.
Yeah. And how does this work as an amendment to the internet's current protocols, and maybe in layman's terms, because I'm sure that listeners aren't on the level as you are with the technology, but how does this work technically?
Yeah, well, yeah. Before I do that, you mentioned Thomas Paine, and
Yeah.
let's think about what he did. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He started a movement,
Mm-hmm.
And he did that, by writing a relatively short, it was really like a long essay, really, right? It was a
Mm-hmm.
pamphlet of about 50 pages
Mm.
called Common Sense. And he shared it with as many people as he could, people distributed, and it found its way around. So his idea was socialized. And
Mm-hmm.
his idea was as follows. He said, look, we can continue to be subjects of a king and just do whatever he says, be in his control, have no rights, and be super frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
or we could choose to be citizens. It was a kind of a revolutionary concept,
Yeah.
citizenship. And we're born with rights, the same rights that the king has, right? We're all created equal, and we have agency and choice and autonomy. And for those rights to mean anything, we have to respect them in others. That's the social contract. And
Mm-hmm.
we can govern ourselves, of, by, and for the people. We can do that. We don't need to be governed by some royal or
Mm-hmm.
some king. And so he put that choice to his fellow settlers, and thankfully they chose citizenship. It happened because it became a movement and people demanded it, right?
Yeah.
And so these rights that we now have, these so-called unalienable rights, are hard fought. These are rights that then we've built a great country, the greatest country ever, on top of, right? Values that respect individuals, where each individual has dignity. They have these rights. They're inherent rights.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so now, let's roll the clock forward 250 years later, we have technology that's stripping us of these rights. We have no autonomy. We have no choice. We have no agency on the current internet. We're surveilled. Our personhood is stolen from us, and we're
Mm-hmm.
manipulated. So if I were to ask you to describe democracy, I don't think you'd say autocratic, centralized, surveillance-based, predatory, exploitive. Which is what our tech has become. So, what I try to do in the book is say, like, we have a similar choice as digital creatures, which we are now. We can choose to be citizens in the digital age, or we can default into being subjects in the digital age and let these
Mm-hmm.
big tech platforms be the new kings. And I think we'd all prefer to be citizens and have rights. And in order to do that, we're going to have to reclaim control of our identity and our
Mm-hmm.
data. And that's essentially the difference here. That's the same thing, by the way, that was done back with the American Revolution that launched
Mm-hmm.
the American project, was individuals reclaiming their humanity and
Mm-hmm.
saying, we have rights, and we demand them,
Mm-hmm.
and we demand that they be respected. And here we are again, hard to believe, but 250 years later, we're actually having to demand our rights again because they've been essentially stolen from us. And again, I don't think this was not the intent of the creators of the internet. It's the
Mm-hmm.
result of the app age we live in, with these 4 or 5 large platforms. Basically, it's machinery to scrape our data and everything
Mm-hmm.
about us, and then profile us, and then manipulate us. So it's a heck of a lot more powerful tool than King George had. I'll tell you
Mm-hmm.
that. He didn't know
Yeah.
every single thing about every one of his subjects like these platforms do. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I think it's just so ironic that the TikTok legislation
Mm-hmm.
and is shedding light on the predatory design of TikTok, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a weapon or a tool for the Chinese government to surveil on U.S. citizens and
Mm-hmm.
scrape our data. Well, why would we want to allow our 5 big platforms to do that? It makes no
Mm-hmm.
sense to me whatsoever. So let's demand to be citizens again. Let's demand to get our rights back. And to do that, we're going to have to own our data. We're going to have to own and control our data. I know we've all mindlessly clicked on the cookies of these big platforms to permission the use of our data, but it's time that we move beyond that and we have an internet where the new apps are clicking on our terms and conditions of use for our data. We'll set the terms, and then the apps will have to abide by those terms, because nobody should own us. This is the time to make that fundamental shift.
Mm-hmm. And what does this look like in reality? Are we using our same phones and we're using apps that are under the decentralized social networking protocol, or are we coming up with new equipment even? Like, how big is this change in our day-to-day life?
I think we should think of it as the user experience will be quite similar. And for now, we'll still be, using, there'll be apps, we're using smartphones, we'll be using different devices that we use now. I think the technology there is going to advance as well, right? But that's, whether we have the existing internet that we're handcuffed to, or we have a new and improved internet, the devices will change as great innovators innovate. But the fundamental change will be who's in charge, who has the power. Do the platforms have the power, or do we, the people, have the power? And that power is derived from our data. So the user experience will be quite similar, but the architecture or the design will be different. So as I said earlier, rather than clicking on the terms and conditions of use of a few big platforms, imagine an internet where the new apps are clicking on our terms and conditions of use. Imagine an internet where our personal data is portable. We can move it around. Imagine the apps are interoperable, so we're no longer in the walled garden of one platform or another. It's now a wide open world, and the internet itself will be reclaimed as ours, rather than, we'll decolonize it as we decentralize it, so that it will be returned to us. You won't have to sign on, have 40 or 50 passwords for different apps. You'll have one handle. Nikki will have a handle, and she'll sign on to the internet, and then all the apps that have agreed to use the same decentralized protocol will be accessible to you, and you'll be able to parse out your data. You may share some of your data with one app that needs to know you're 18 years of age or older. You may parse out some of information about your physical location to some other app. And our social graph, our personal information, is very dense. It contains all kinds of things. We're not just one thing. We're made up of many things, right? And many different attributes. We should not be giving up everything about us to these platforms just to use the internet. And we should be in charge of what we share with whom. It's what we do in the real world, right? I mean, before the internet, we shared little or nothing with strangers, and a lot with our most intimate relationships, right? Our family and our significant other and so forth, our closest friends. That's not how the internet works right now, right? These platforms know everything about us. That's just wrong. We should be the ones who decide who gets to know, what we share with whom.
And we limit that information in real life to keep ourselves safe, to protect ourselves. And we talked about kids and how they are not protected in this digital space currently. So how will the new net protect children? And maybe we use sextortion as an example. So right now we're facing an epidemic of sextortion, where scammers are creating hundreds of thousands of fake social media profiles and targeting our kids. So how could the new net help decrease sextortion cases, if we can use that as an example?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head when you said that the way you keep yourself safe is that you engage in trusted relationships and trusted communities, right?
Yeah.
So you have a way to protect yourself. We all do, by who we share what with, right? So that we're not just exposing everything about us to people who would have bad intentions and want to hurt us. So the internet currently is something where it actually amplifies the behavior of bad actors, right? Because they have access to all this information, and they're able to find their way into the private worlds of young children, and then exploit them. I mean, it's crazy. Think about this. These young kids, many of these young kids that have taken their own life, have done it under their parents' roof, right? So think about this. our home, our homes are our safe place as
Mm-hmm.
parents. And I have 7 children. I want my children safe, right? That's why we have a
Mm-hmm.
home and a roof over our heads. It's our safe place.
Yeah.
These platforms are in our homes, okay? Literally in our homes. They know
Mm-hmm.
more about our kids than we as parents know about our kids. And they are preying on vulnerable young people. And it's hard enough to raise children and
Mm-hmm.
keep them safe in the pre-internet world, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was possible. It's now impossible to keep children safe in this day and age with the internet as currently designed,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it so easy for bad actors to do bad things. And
Mm-hmm.
so we need now an internet where, parents have the ability to keep their kids safe and their kids are not preyed upon by these bad actors. And
Mm-hmm.
so returning control of identity and data to individuals and then giving parents the ability to have a better chance of protecting their children, because their children is right now a parent can post an image of one of their children's on Instagram or one of these platforms because they're happy to do it because they want everybody to know their child's happy and it's a beautiful picture of a beautiful birthday party or something like that. That's
Mm-hmm.
information that can be used by people who have that intention to
Right.
actually do
Mm-hmm.
bad things. I mean, how many
Yeah.
more articles are we going to read where children's faces have been applied to different images and
Mm-hmm.
now the child has to live with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it's just it's just wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
it's gotten it's gotten way out of hand. Thankfully, there's some movements with legislation and some of the regulation that parents have been advocating for some time. But
Mm-hmm.
regulation alone is not going to solve this problem.
Right.
We want the regulation, of course, to mitigate the harms, but we need better internet technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's sad that we can't even brag about our children anymore online, in a space that we think is private to our family and friends, but in fact is not private. So, what is the timeline looking for this? I assume it's going to take time to get things rolled out and to get people migrated over. I know parents are going to be chomping at the bit to get involved, sign up, start testing this out. So, what are we looking at for a timeline?
Well, right now we have, I greenlit the tech portion. Let's back up for a second. Project
Okay.
Liberty is way more than a tech project, right? It's a
Hmm.
project to put forward better policies that are
Hmm.
forward looking, that will
Hmm.
enable a better internet. It has a component that's about movement making, and that's why we're partnering with parents, for instance. And then
Hmm.
it has the tech track. The tech portion of the project was greenlit in December of 19, where our tech team created a open source protocol that
Hmm.
would enable everything we're talking about. They've created that protocol, released it to the world. It's
Hmm.
open source. It's now owned by everyone, and then they've built the tech up the stack that allows it to be used.
Hmm.
MeWe, which is a social media platform with 20 million users,
Hmm.
has is the first mover to this new world. They're
Okay.
migrating their 20 million users over to DSNP,
Hmm.
and we have nearly 1 million people now using this new, better alternative internet.
Hmm.
Now, 1 million people is not enough to have a viable alternative to the
Hmm.
current internet that we're handcuffed to, which is why the bid for TikTok,
Right.
because we think it would be just fantastic, actually, to move 170 million people
Hmm.
over to this technology that now we have the proof of concept. It works.
Hmm.
This and the only issue now is, okay, how do we create scale here
Hmm.
so that it really matters and it's a real alternative? And if we move 170 million people over, then
Hmm.
we have scale. So I'm really grateful to the parents for stepping forward and joining the People's Bid. because quite frankly, I think the parents will have the strongest voice here. I think that not only do they have the stories to bring forward the harms. I mean, these stories, I've heard them many times and I still find them heart-wrenching. I think the parents are unbelievably courageous to do this, and it's amazing that they have the ability to get beyond, their grief and actually honor their children. And
Right.
I think these stories are going to resonate with lots of parents, probably every parent who has kids of this age that are vulnerable. And because, just like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, it was the moms that lost children, sadly, that came forward to start the movement, but it was actually the moms afraid that they were going to lose a child to drunk driving that really, expanded the movement. I think the same thing's going to happen here. And if we can really create a movement around this people's bid and a movement that demands a better, healthier, safer internet, which, by the way, as I point out in the book, is totally possible. It's just technology, right? And we're proving that. We just need scale. So let's create scale, and let's take matters into our own hands and just create this new net. And then let brilliant technologists and brilliant social scientists and concerned citizens, and most especially moms and dads, go help build this new internet. And let's do it together and feel really good, and replace that helpless feeling with hopefulness, and with the idea that, okay, yeah, we don't have to just sit and complain about the problem over and over again. It doesn't have to be this way, and we can do something about it.
Yeah. Great. And these parents, I call them the heroes of our generation, the fact that they retell these stories over and over. And I've interviewed dozens at this point of parent survivors who've lost a child. And we focus a lot on who the child was, what their interests were, just to get to know the kids. And I think that's important because parents see their own kids in these children, and it starts to make it personal. And then you get mad, and then you need to do something about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the parents and the moms in particular are going to bring this conversation to the kitchen table, right? To everybody's kitchen table. They're going to bring it to the sidelines of the soccer match. They're going to bring it to the church parking lot. They're going to bring it to the PTA meeting. They're going to socialize this in a very powerful way. And we welcome all parents to join the fight here. And the bid for TikTok, is a vehicle, right, to fix this mess. It's a vehicle to actually catalyze the alternative internet so that we can, really, really make progress fast here and compress time. We have lots of use cases that are coming over after MeWe onto DSNP. And so this alternative is going to happen, sooner or later. I just would like to see it happen sooner, so that which the TikTok migration would enable, so that less kids are harmed, right? And that we can get some kind of semblance of control again of our lives and our democracy, and have nice conversations at Thanksgiving dinner again, and just really be proud of what we're building for the future here, and especially for future generations.
Okay. And anything else you want to share with parents? I know you have young children and are facing a lot of these decisions in real time. So any other advice for parents that they can employ today?
Well, I mean, my first message to parents who have had an experience where the kids have been harmed by this, and especially those who have lost children, my heart goes out to you, and I just have so much admiration for these parents who are stepping forward and leading the way. And I just want them all to know, all parents to know, even those with young children, and just have concerns. Join the fight. Be part of this, because we need to do this together. This is not something that a new piece of technology or a new protocol on its own is going to solve. The only way to change this, and to get these big platforms to change, or to allow new technology to leapfrog them, is to make this a movement and to get people involved. And I think that parents have the power to lead the way here. And I just welcome them all to join this journey with us.
Frank, thank you so much for what you are doing. Your book is sort of like a Bible to me. I just was poring over the pages, and it gives hope to parents and caregivers everywhere that this fear-based situation we survive in doesn't have to be this way, that we can create a better world through human-centric internet instead of one that lines the pocketbooks of a few Silicon Valley executives and harms our children as well. So just on behalf of parents, we're truly grateful, and I want to thank you again.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks for your time as well and for socializing all this. And I just would love your listeners to take a few hours of their valuable time and read the book or listen to it on audio. The proceeds go to Project Liberty, so that's a good thing. But more importantly, I want to know what people think. Do they agree with what's in the book? And if they do, share that. But also if they disagree or they want to challenge parts of it, I want to hear from them, especially because we just want to get it right. This isn't about being right. It's about getting it right. This is our biggest fight, and we're only going to succeed if we do this together. Your listeners can all go to ourbiggestfight.com.
Great. Okay.
Or directly to projectliberty.io.
Okay, perfect. Frank, thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate all your work.
See you
Thanks,
later.
Frank.